What we are here for is to teach you all some very valuable skills to get your credentials, to make yourselves more marketable in the marketplace, as well as to give yourself more tools for development. Whether you may want to create a website or a blog that can help with your own business, or again, to give yourself this tool set if you are applying for jobs. So we're going to discuss application development. So full disclosure, my background is in biometric-based authentication and cybersecurity. And last year, I did give a lecture on cybersecurity. This time around, talking about app development. And one of the things about being a computer scientist, a lot of areas may not necessarily be your specialty, but going through the computer science program at most institutions will give you the baseline skills to pursue a specialty in mobile app development or database management or networking or cybersecurity. The purpose of getting a computer science degree is to give yourself the baseline knowledge to pursue these areas. And while you're in a higher education program, you may decide to take additional courses, whether electives or apply for internships that are focused on these things to begin developing your specialty areas then and there. But yeah, let's talk money though. That's kind of a very strong indicator, right? Of or a very strong incentive and motive. So your standard programmer or software developer. So this is entry level. This is just coming in to a company, right? On average, about close to 70,000, right? Now that's not much, and again, it's entry level. Depending upon where you live, that could be very generous, or it may not really be much. But the reason it's an average, if you look at the diagram or the figure here, we see on the x-axis the average pay for each specific type of company. So Google typically would be based out in California. You need that six-figure income just to be able to survive out in California. So this is standard. This is average. Areas like EMC Corporation, based out on the East Coast, close to 80,000 starting off. And that's not too bad either. So these ranges, there's a variety of positions, and based off of the location, your expected salary is appropriate for the area that you live in. And typically a programmer or a software developer, you're coming in, you're writing code for user interface events, or you're writing ways to get your application or program to interface with a server or to use specific APIs or services. You're testing your code, right? So you're testing the application as well. So that's debugging your code, making sure that it works properly, trying a bunch of use cases to make sure that if the expected users do something they're not supposed to do, it's not going to crash your application. And some of you all may have experienced that. In fact, in chat, can anybody let me know if you've had any experience where an application or any type of software just crashed on you unexpectedly? And this could be a video game, it could be a mobile app, it could be software used at your school, for example. Oh, yes, on the PS3. So, yeah, I've had my PS3 eventually crash on me. But yeah, plenty of video games, especially ones where you download digitally. There may be something wrong with the download and it'll crash easily. And yeah, on the Switch as well. Yep. Yeah, on the MacBook as well. Now, I'm not necessarily an Apple guy, even though I'm using a MacBook Air right now. But yeah, I wish my chairperson, my boss, essentially, he loves Apple products. I wish I could screenshot your responses for everyone saying that their Macs have crashed on them. And if anyone's had programs that have crashed on them, and the purpose of debugging your application or program is to do your best to prevent that. And sometimes you just can't prevent that. There'll always be unexpected things. That's why you always have to release patches and different versions of things. And it's just the nature of the beast. So let's move on to slide number 23. So with slide 23, if you're going to be in the software development field, and when I say software development, one moment, I have Talib calling right now. Okay, let's carry on. So slide number 23. After a while of being in the field, then you'll eventually earn enough experience. And if you have leadership capability, you'll be a senior software engineer or developer or programmer. So typically a senior developer will be leading a team of developers. So they'll be more responsible for receiving the instructions of what needs to be implemented. Senior software developer, you'll typically be managing a team. You'll be given a task from the manager about what your team needs to implement. You may divide up the task. You may work out the overall environment for how all of the different code and methods and modules will come together, who'll be responsible for managing any services or APIs, so on and so forth. So with that experience comes an average increase in that salary. And again, 91,000 in Texas, you're borderline rich, at the very least upper middle class. 91,000 in California, you're poor. So when we say average, this is the average all across the nation, where you'll see Google Inc., for example, this rises up to between 120 to 140,000, pretty decent. And the areas where it's a little bit more to the left, those are areas that are in states where the average cost of living is significantly lower. So making roughly 80,000 in Texas, again, is still very great. So a system analyst is less about the coding or implementation, but the analyst is working with the clientele to make sure that the client is satisfied. So when we have people come into the computer science program, right, they're always saying, hey, we like the field, we want to make money, but we're not really strong coders or programmers. They can code and develop to an extent, but they don't see themselves just sitting at a computer coding all day. And we tell them that's perfectly fine. Being a computer scientist isn't just coding. That's not the end all be all. It's giving you the knowledge of computer systems, of tools, applications, technologies, such that you could work as a system analyst, where you work with the client to make sure that their needs are translated from the person saying, hey, I want an app that can monitor the growth of my crops in my garden, to explaining to the programming team, hey, there needs to be modules to have this variable that can change based off of weather, humidity, and can monitor the growth of a crop. So they'll be the ones who would typically lead a team of analysts on these different projects. And they work between that area of business and computer science and programming. So the average salary is 63,000, but again, that goes up depending upon what area you live in. And now project manager. So the project manager is the one that the system analyst and the programmers come to. The project manager is the one who's kind of at the top. They have to manage all these different areas from the business side to the programming side. And that's why they delegate the work to the senior programming developers and the senior system analyst. So they're the ones who manage the employees. And quite honestly, you do have to have not only a lot of experience in this area, you have to know what your team's doing, right? But you also have to have exceptional leadership capability. Some people, myself, right? I don't want to be responsible for hiring and firing people. That's not what I wanted to do. And hopefully I won't have to do that, but if I have to, it is what it is, right? So that takes a specific type of person. And if you feel like that's what you want, then just make sure that you understand that it's more than just programming. It's also being able to manage and being able to organize. It can be a very exhausting job. You're working weekends, but the pay, if you're good with getting this type of pay, then all for it, go for it. So I talked to you a little bit about the incentives, right? What kind of pay there is and whatnot. So how do you even develop an app? We talked about the pay for it, but there are many different criterion and needs for different people, right? So when it comes to an application, you have to consider a number of things. Who are your clients? What resources do you have? What is it that you're trying to do? Is it something that can feasibly be done, right? So are you making a game, such as in the case of this hackathon? Is this going to be an educational application? Is this an application that deals with music? Who's your target audience? Is it for everyone? Is it for youth? Is it for adults? And you want to check to see, does this app already exist? Now, just because the app already exists does not mean that you should still go for it. Competition is healthy for the marketplace. I mean, Zoom was around and Google decided to get in on the market, and Google proposed Google Meet, and it allows for easier integration of Google products like Google Slides and being able to use your account to manage your Google Meets conversations. So even though it's still the same tool, a virtual meeting application, they have their own niche for that, where they attract their own market of people. What is your application going to run on, Android or Apple? Or could it run on both? Because you have to understand, when you're developing an application, there's different languages that are required to develop an app to run on one operating system or the other. So when we talk about what your application will do, these are just some tips, and I'm glad I did provide you all with the link to the slide deck. If you want to download it so you can go through this at a later time, feel free to, because if this was a classroom, I'd be spending 5 or 10 minutes on each one of these bullet points. But for the sake of time, I have to kind of rush through this just a little bit. But if we give an example of the Plant Doctor app, let's say that we want this app to provide interactive diagnoses for plant health problems. So the way this would work, users of the application would submit text and photographs to assist with the diagnoses, right? So this is an application that links plant experts with users or people who are just getting started with growing plants. And they specify the functionality. So at the base level, the app should allow for people to submit photographs and text, and it should be easily viewed by other people. So that's the bare bones of it. And then you have to consider, well, where are the pictures going to be stored at? How should the pictures be represented? Doesn't matter what format it's in. Do you want to restrict who can see what? Or do you want to make it available for everyone? How do you protect your application? Would people upload images that are inappropriate, right? How do you manage that? So these are all of the different considerations for your application, but at its base level, what you want to identify are what are the minimum features: uploading text and pictures so that other people can view. Okay, good. I just had to check chat really quick. So again, who's going to be your audience, right? So we talked about kids, adults, whomever, but if you're going to get specific for the Plant Doctor app, for example, users of this would for sure be farmers. We know it'd be farmers, and then gardeners as well, people whose hobbies are growing gardens, homeowners as well. Once you have a home, and I can speak, I just bought a home last November of last year. Then all of a sudden you start caring a little bit more about plants. You want your house to look nice. And if you buy some expensive seeds and your flowers aren't growing the way they should be growing, you may want to get an expert opinion. So many other different users may be using this example app. And for each one of those users, you have to consider what are their resources, what are their limitations. So there are many different types of audiences, and for each type of audience, they're going to have a various level of education and expertise. If I'm making an app that's going to be used by IT folk, then I feel that I can have some features in there that are a little bit more technical. It can be reasonably be assumed that they can follow along. Versus if I'm making something for, let's say, older citizens, let's say 65 and plus. While there are certainly folks who are senior citizen that could code loops around me and can truly understand stuff, they're probably the minority. So you'd have to make sure that you develop your application for accessibility, make it so that it's easy to see, easy to read, because senior citizens are more likely to have vision problems, right? Nationalities, languages, and translations. Do you want your application to be usable by people who may not understand the primary language that you're developing the app for? And then again, like we talked about, you have to consider the device that it's going to be used on. So I would like everyone, it's 12:43, we have about 15 minutes, I would say. I want everyone to, in chat right now, just come up with an app idea. So in this example, we talked about the Plant Doctor, and this was an application that would allow interactive diagnoses for plant health. So if you've already had an application that you wanted to do, just kind of type up in a sentence what your app would be. Now, it doesn't matter how crazy or ridiculous it is. I just want to see what ideas you have, even off the top of your head. So I'm going to type up an idea that may seem kind of ridiculous or silly so you all can get an idea. So I'm going to type this in chat right now. Okay, so I see a few in. We have anti-crack run. So this doesn't have to be an app for the hackathon. Right now, I just want to know any kind of idea that you have. If you want to put down your hackathon ideas, you can, and hopefully no other teams will try to bite your idea. But honestly, when you're doing a hackathon, I okay, you have to assume that in some hackathons, there may be some people who may be looking at other people's projects and thinking, hey, that's a really good idea. So I don't think that anyone here would do that. But if you're paranoid about it, maybe save your ideas to yourself for now. But a man running from the crack monster and the hearts act as lives. Okay, so I like that. That's kind of a bit of an anti-drug thing, and it involves gaming as well. An app to create a Tesla with my brain. Oh, wow. To control a Tesla with my brain. Now, that's actually very interesting, Hassan. At VSU, one of the graduate students, they're doing a project where you can control the drone with your brain. They're using this headset that you put on, and depending upon thinking certain thoughts, like if you think of an apple, you can code it up so that thoughts about apples will correlate to making the drone move forward, for example. Now, the thing about it, it's kind of finicky and not everyone can use it. The science behind it is neuroscience, and that's outside of my area, but it does work. They've tested it on about a population of 10 students to see who can control it and who cannot. So that's pretty interesting. There is actually a way in which it may be possible to use your brain to control a Tesla. Okay, brain branding. A game like Hogwarts Legacy. Okay, cool. Chicken that are wings run to a stove to get cooked. Okay, so it's like a game. I haven't had lunch yet, so that is not the last thing I need to hear about some nice chicken wings. But a game like Hogwarts Legacy, but also like Five Nights at Freddy. That would be horrifying. Okay, let's get back to it. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to hear about some of your and then I see an app about creating ways to build robots that play soccer and also talk. That's pretty cool. Okay, so again, you want to see what ideas already exist, because if you find an application that's like your own, if you find that application um, that allows for development of robots, you want to make sure that you're not recreating the exact same thing. So there may be applications that allow you to develop and construct robots, but are there applications that allow you to do that for robots to play soccer? And maybe this application has the means for that, but if you make something that's specifically targeted for that, and if you know you can get a big enough audience for that, then there you go. You've got competition for that other application now. So jot down what you want your app to do. So we talked about the functionality. With the farmers tool, the functionality was something that allows people to upload pictures and text so that other people could see it. That's the bare bones. That's the fundamentals, right? But what else? What if you wanted it to be able to scan the scent of a plant? Now that's kind of crazy. I don't know if there's any technology that allows you to scan a plant and get a scent for it. I don't even know if that's a real thing. That's kind of crazy, but write it down anyway, because even if that may not be feasible, you may be able to get a certain camera setting that can get specific detail from a plant once you take the picture that may be important for experts. If you can get the temperature of a plant, for example, using thermal imaging, that may be something. And how is the user going to interact with the app? Are they texting? Is it swiping? What actions can your app do? Is it going to have to be able to play music, in which case it'll have to interface with the speaker of the device? Is it going to be a game, in which case you have to work out the controls? Is it displaying information, in which case you have to consider accessibility? And then you're going to sketch it out. You're going to do a rough sketch of what your application is going to look like. So you want to draw up kind of like some squares, and we're going to kind of get into this with Bubble.io of sketching what your app will look like. Bubble.io is really good with being able to preview your design. So finally, you want to look into the tool that you're going to be using to put this together. So there are many different programming languages, and all of them have various codes and prompts. So for example, the Swift language. Swift is used for Apple development. You'll have to know Swift if you want to do any type of Apple product. Python is a very universal language that has a lot of flexibility, and it's becoming a predominant language. A lot of companies used to look for C++ and Java experience. Now they want Python. But speaking of Java, Java is something that can be ran on many different devices, whether desktop, mobile devices. And the reason for this is Java runs through this JVM, Java Virtual Machine, which is available on many different types of devices. So unlike C++, where once you code something in C++, it can only work on the machine that you coded it for. With Java, you code something in Java, it can work on many different types of devices. And Python is very similar as well. So JavaScript is more of a web-based language. If you're doing something that's strictly a website or web-based, you may be using JavaScript, HTML for the design, CSS for the logic. So it goes on and on. These are just some of the more popular ones. And then you have to actually build it. Are you doing it by yourself? Are you working with a team? If you're working with the team, that can be easier and harder, because on one hand, you've got more hands in the pot, but on the other hand, you have to expect your team members to be able to pull their weight, and you have to be able to divide up the work in such a way that once everyone's done with their part, all of the different pieces can connect together. And then you have to test it. Testing can be fun because going back to the debugging issue, right? If I code up a calculator, right, you would expect people to try 1 + 1 to see what happens. You would expect people to do 1 divided or 12 divided by 6 to test that out. Would you expect people to purposely divide by 0? Maybe not, because everyone knows that dividing by 0 is impossible, right? Or at least as far as we know. But there are some people who may not know that, or some people who accidentally type something, or who may just want to see what happens. And so many basic programming assignments, as soon as you go into undergraduate school, right, in the computer science department, one of your assignments may be to do a calculator. And the best thing about this assignment is it teaches you about how to handle exceptions and errors, because there is a divide by 0 exception, right? That's built into most languages, and you can account for this. And that's a good way to teach people how to account for any type of errors that may happen. So you get other people to test it, because they're going to try some things that will intentionally or unintentionally try to break your app. And if you break an app, it crashes. That's what happens with Mac. That's what happens with the PlayStation 3 games and the Switches and PS4s. They crash because something unexpected happened that couldn't handle it. Versus if you try to divide by 0, you have something in there that says, hey, you can't do this, but your program still runs. And then you make adjustments. We talked about releasing different patches and whatnot, right? So that's necessary. Sometimes you release your product and you get feedback, and then you make the adjustments, and then you release again. And hopefully you don't end up like Bethesda, where you're just releasing something every 2 weeks. So we already talked about what types of app ideas do you have. These are some sites. Last year we used Scratch, which was a drag and drop coding language, and we use that for the quote unquote game or application. This year we're using something that I think is a lot more interesting, Construct 3. And Leon Pryor will be giving you all a walkthrough for how to use it, but I'm going to introduce it in our second session, where we talk about actually coding this up. So again, for developing websites, these are a few website things. So we're going to test out Bubble, and we're going to talk more about the application itself. We're going to talk a little bit about Construct 3 after we take a brief break and we do a brief mentoring session.